Hi everyone, I'm Oscar Howie, I'm Chief of Staff at CEA. I work in our executive office with Zach, and I'll be back up here after Zach's talk to ask him some of your questions, which you can submit via the session in your swap card app during or after the talk. Zach joined CEA as our CEO. This is a common slip up. I've been doing it for more than a year now because Zach joined us last February. He started out as a management consultant and a startup guy before being Open Philanthropy's Chief of Staff and CEO of Effective Ventures. And under Zach's leadership, we at CEA, under our stewardship strategy, are focused on building sustainable momentum towards EA being the best it can be. And so with that aspiration in mind, please join me in welcoming Zach to the stage.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you, Francis. And many thanks, again, just to the organizers, our volunteers, everybody who has planned this event, as well as all of you for making this an event and coming here. I know many of you have traveled from all over the world, are leaving family and friends and pets behind, and we really appreciate it. I'll give you a heads up. I also got a little bit overly excited and spent many of the past few days talking with all of you as well. And so my throat is a little bit more sore than it normally is. Might need a little bit of water, but I am very excited to be here. I stood on the stage about a year ago, as Oscar mentioned, shortly after I joined CEA as its new CEO. And I wanted to talk about a journey that Effective Altruism is on. Part of what I discussed was that if we want to go to where we want to go, to live up to our potential as a community, we need to be better at telling our own stories rather than letting critics and commentators who don't know us as well tell it for us. And since then, I think we've seen notable signs of progress, particularly in recent months. In May, Time magazine celebrated Peter Singer's influence, as well as Carrie Tuna and Dustin Moskovitz using EA frameworks and their philanthropic giving through Open Philanthropy, putting them among the most influential 100 people in philanthropy. I've also been glad to see EA featured in places like the New York Times, where they turn to us for inputs on topics ranging from donations in response to US aid to the potential implications of digital sentience. But maybe most surprising, and let's also be honest, most entertaining, was recent coverage that came from the Late Night Daily Show. I take it many of you have already seen it. But for those of you who haven't, we'll orient you with a clip.
That's right. The Shrimp Welfare Project is a charity improving the lives of appetizers.
We make sure that they have a more humane slaughter method. We try to avoid overcrowding. We try to eliminate eye stalk ablation, which is this practice of cutting or crushing of the eyes of female shrimp. There is technology that alleviates suffering by the billions every year.
Like what?
Like electrical stunning that renders animals unconscious, and then they die, but without feeling any pain.
Okay, so you're electrocuting shrimp.
That's right.
I think there is a lot to love here. Shrimp is getting a large public platform, and a comedy show is making space to accurately portray the horror of inhumane slaughter, overcrowding, and eye stalk ablation. It's playful, and it's funny, and it's informative, showing that treating our work as something deadly serious doesn't mean we always have to take ourselves too seriously. And it's a segment that I'm hoping many more people will see. Despite those upsides, there is one line that sticks out to me, and I want to take another look.
Effective altruists are like the young Sheldons of the charity world, using logic to find the most cost-efficient ways to relieve suffering, which sometimes means malaria prevention, but other times it leads to this.
With a single dollar, we can improve the lives of over 2,000 shrimp.
And 0 humans.
That is correct.
But the philosophy of effective altruism pretty much boils down to this. Your feelings.
And so, I want to welcome you all to EA Global by talking about this. So if you'll excuse my French, fuck your feelings. That's not the most polite message for our audience, although I actually did find it quite humorous and entertaining in the context of The Daily Show. But I think it also exists outside of just a comedy platform. There's this caricature that EA is populated by cold, uncaring, spreadsheet-motivated robots. And it would be easy to laugh it off if it were only in the realm of comedy, but it's not. I think this misconception follows us around in many contexts in more and less polite forms. And I think that's despite it being importantly wrong. Not only do I think it doesn't represent who most of us are, I think it also has important implications for how we view our work and how we talk to the rest of the world. Because most of us, I think, aren't people without feelings. We aren't here despite our feelings. In many cases, we are here because of them. Part of why I feel like this caricature doesn't represent EA as a whole is because I don't feel like it represents me. When I think of why I want to do good, I end up thinking a lot about the feelings I have. And when I think about how feelings can drive action, I come back to a cause that until now hasn't had much time at EA Global. Potholes. And now, given this is EAG, I think many of you might believe that I'm talking about potholes and LMICs and their counterfactual impact on traffic fatalities, but no. I want to talk about potholes in my hometown of Omaha, Nebraska. And I know we have a global audience here, and so for those of you who aren't familiar with Nebraska, it's in the middle of the US, and when I once told a European I was from there, he remarked, "Oh, I know Nebraska, famously the most boring place in America." It's also the place where my father had 15 minutes of fame because he filled potholes. My father had a day job, and this wasn't it. Instead, he ran a small online travel agency. But the city of Omaha had neglected its decaying infrastructure for years, and he and everyone else in the city were struck driving over broken roads to get to work, the grocery store, or to drop kids like me off at school. And many of them felt mad about it. And one day, when my father drove over one pothole too many, he got mad too. But unlike everyone else in the city, he didn't just get mad. He decided that he would fill the potholes himself. So he went out, bought his own asphalt patching material, and he went around in the neighborhood with his wheelbarrow filling the holes. He spent countless hours and thousands of dollars just to make the roads a little less broken. Now, don't worry, I have no desire to advocate for potholes in Omaha, Nebraska as one of the most pressing problems. But I think there's something that unites a person who's angry about the potholes their local government doesn't fill, and a person angry about the holes in global aid that their national government makes, and a person who feels sad that animals are tortured en masse to feed us, and a person who feels fearful about the impending possibility of human extinction from transformative technology. Those people have something important in common when they say, "This is a problem I care about, I feel about, and I want to take action." Because the sad fact about the world is that potholes aren't the only problem that people encounter, feel strongly about, recognize that something should be different, and then do nothing. Let's think about USAID. The majority of Americans support maintaining or increasing the amount of American aid that existed prior to Trump taking office, suggesting that there are at least 150 million upset Americans. Yet, only a fraction have taken action. On this side of the pond, about a quarter of Brits report believing there is at least a 10% chance AI causes human extinction within the next century, which makes for about 15 million adults feeling some degree of fear about the fate of humanity. Yet again, only a fraction have taken action. There are many people in this world who look at these problems, feel something is wrong, and choose to look away. Sometimes the problem with a pothole isn't that we don't feel it. It's that if we give it attention, we can feel too much. If we're forced to drive over it day after day, it feels better to simply turn off the part of our mind that has to feel that something is wrong than to sit and bubble in your anger or sadness or fear and the reality that the problem has gotten bad, really bad, and that nobody else is going to fix it for you. But I think many of the people in this room know that tuning out isn't the only option. There's a fraction of the world that doesn't just keep driving. People who look at much bigger holes than potholes and say, if no one else will fix this, I will. And a startlingly large proportion of those people in the world are in this room right now. Many of us in the EA community have dedicated ourselves to staying with our feelings and not looking away. We stare at eye-wateringly large problems day after day. What separates this community isn't that we don't feel, it's that we don't stop feeling. We act. Effective altruism provides tools for us to translate our feelings into action. When the new US administration issued stop work orders that froze USAID's global health programs, GiveWell didn't wait in vain for someone else to step in. They moved quickly to plug the most critical gaps. Within weeks, they had mobilized $24 million in emergency funding to provide life-saving malaria treatments and HIV testing services. And they're currently investigating more than $100 million in additional grants as they continue managing the fallout from these cuts. When it comes to AI safety, the effective altruism community was one of the earliest groups taking action. Open Philanthropy identified risks from artificial intelligence as a top priority cause all the way back in 2015. Since then, our community has grown AI safety from a niche concern into a thriving field with its own institutions, training programs, and research agendas. Programs like MATS, the Machine Learning Alignment and Theory Scholars, have trained a new generation of AI safety researchers, pioneering novel research agendas like externalized reasoning oversight, situational awareness evaluations, and gradient routing, which all sound extremely important and which I will confidently pretend to understand if you ask me about them at office hours. And from conversations with many of you about why people like you take these sorts of actions, it's clear that before these actions came, there were strong feelings: sadness, anger, hope. This is what compassionate action looks like, translating our feelings into concrete steps that help. EA gives us the tools to do that, not to feel less, but to act more. Why is it then that sometimes we're portrayed as spreadsheet-obsessed robots? Part of it is, I think, when these stories are being told by us or by others, the tendency is to focus on what we're doing or not doing. It's our actions that count. It can be harder to make space for the how and the why. It's not newsworthy that someone felt upset by a pothole. It is newsworthy what someone did in response to it. And EA, our whats are even weirder. So they tend to attract more attention. Shrimp welfare, digital sentience. They're controversial and counterintuitive, which makes them good for clicks. Whereas our whys, our feelings, they're more intuitive, more widely shared, more recognizably human. In other words, they're boring. But that doesn't mean we should cut them from our story. There's a long track record of EAs naming feelings as a foundation for action. Back in 2017, Holden Karnofsky wrote about radical empathy as a motivating reason to care about animals and people on the other side of the planet. In the same way, it was once radical to recognize the moral worth of a neighbor of a different race. In his book, The Precipice, Toby Ord talks about why he cares about humanity's future and writes that, when I think of the unbroken chain of generations leading to our time and of everything they have built for us, I am humbled. I am overwhelmed with gratitude, shocked by the enormity of the inheritance and at the impossibility of returning even the smallest fraction of the favor. Because 100 billion of the people to whom I owe everything are gone forever. And because what they created is so much larger than my life, than my entire generation. But those feelings, those motivations, rarely make it into stories about our work. It's too easy to focus on what's different. And the thing that separates the majority of the people inside this room from the majority of people outside of it is not our feelings, it's our actions. Even when it's not newsworthy, it can be worth reminding people that, hey, just like everybody else, we'd find it really sad if they all died. Sometimes it's okay to tell people what they already know and feel. Sometimes it's okay not to tell people all the ways in which they could be acting differently, and instead validate all of the ways in which they know how their feeling makes sense. Sometimes it's okay not to emphasize what's original and unique about EA, but rather the ways in which we are the same and can connect to everyone else. The lack of attention on what makes us the same can instead put the focus on what makes us different. And that means that oftentimes discussions surrounding EA center less on the what and more what we do and more on the what of we don't do. You aren't focused on homelessness in your own backyard. You aren't trying to focus your own country's broken healthcare. You aren't focused on the discrimination you see every day. And because there's so much concern with what we aren't doing, that can lead people to believe that we don't care. But I don't think that's true. I'm sad every time I see someone living on the streets in my hometown of San Francisco. I'm filled with love for my parents and fear when I think about their ailing health. I'm angry and upset about the racism and homophobia I saw growing up in Omaha, Nebraska. But I also feel angry at a food system that plucks the eye stalks of shrimp, at governments that leave children to die of preventable diseases, and at corporations who recklessly race to develop technologies that could endanger us all. I care about every tortured animal, every dying child, and every future individual that could lead a fulfilling life. But I also know I can't help them all. And if we don't want to just deny the world's problems, and if we don't want to dissociate from our feelings, then we need a way to decide which of those feelings we act on and which actions to take. That is compassion. Compassion is what we call converting our feelings into actions to help others. It's the bridge between our awareness that other people are hurting and our actions to do something to make it better. Effective altruism is compassionate. This community is compassionate. We recognize that the world doesn't just need us to feel its suffering, it needs us to take action to alleviate it. There's a familiar EA trait that's described as something like taking ideas seriously. But I also think there's a less talked about one, which is taking feelings seriously. When we feel sad or angry or afraid or hopeful about the state of the world, we ask ourselves, what can we do about it with the resources available to us? What can I do about it with the time and money available to me? EA principles are still the best tools I know of in the entire world for answering those questions, which is to say, they're the best tools I know of for how we can put compassion into practice. Our feelings tell us that action is required, but in the face of so many complex and seemingly insurmountable problems, our feelings alone can't tell us which actions to take or which problems to prioritize. That is where our principles come in. Impartiality, scope sensitivity, and truth-seeking and recognizing trade-offs may seem cold or uncaring at first glance, but they're not the problem. They're an essential part of the solution. Without impartiality, we'll be blind to the needs of those far away or unfamiliar. Organizations like Rethink Priorities have done pioneering work on sentience and how to weigh animal suffering, extending our moral circle. Without scope sensitivity, we'll fail to help as many as we can by as much as we could. Scope-sensitive members of the community haven't flinched while going down the species by body size and up the species by population size, from cows to chickens to shrimp to insects, ultimately improving the lives of billions of animals. Without truth-seeking, we'll be beholden to familiar ideas even when they lead us astray. This community has funded and used and supported research from the Welfare Footprint Institute to change their strategies and better understand how to help chicken and fish and pigs. Whether we like it or not, everyone in this room and outside of it who wants to make a difference has to make hard trade-offs. recognizing trade-offs isn't a failure of compassion. It's an expression of it. Our resources, our time and money are finite, and they're much smaller than the full scale of all of the world's problems. So we have to choose. Between just the US and the UK, there are about 2 million registered nonprofits and charities, over 100 times the number of McDonald's. And every time we dedicate ourselves to one of those options, we're choosing not to dedicate those resources to close to 2 million others. One way to choose is to look at what's immediately in front of us in our own backyards, what we might feel the most immediacy about, and act on that. The other way is to make spreadsheets. And we know it's unconventional, and for many it's counterintuitive, that caring deeply and taking feelings seriously can be expressed in the form of a cost-effectiveness calculation. It's understandable that without knowing the why behind why we do this, people might watch us as intentionally and calculatedly choosing not to help those people close to home, assuming we're cold and uncaring. And I think, though, that gets EA the wrong way around. It's not that our spreadsheets make us uncaring. It's that we make spreadsheets because we care so much. Why does this misconception matter? If other compassionate people in the world don't see us as compassionate, and they don't hear us communicating that EA is a meaningful way to be compassionate, we risk not bringing in more like-minded people who can dedicate their resources to tackling the world's most pressing problems. In every Rethink Priorities survey on how people have first found EA, personal context comes out on top. How we show up matters. It mattered to me in my EA journey. I was deeply skeptical of AI safety when I first discovered EA. It took me a long time to be convinced that it was something I should be concerned about. And the primary reason wasn't that I was presented with bad arguments, and it wasn't because I was stupid. It was because I associated many of the ideas with cold and faceless people on the internet, and I didn't warm up to them or their ideas. Now, this was not me at my truth-seeking best. It wasn't the most EA of reactions, but it was a very human one. The people I mentally associated with AI didn't seem particularly compassionate to me. Instead, they seemed potentially self-centered, inflating the importance of their work and ignoring the very real diseases killing people on the other side of the planet. Because the only thing that could threaten them and their rich Western houses was a sci-fi fantasy. But what did change my mind was spending so much time with them. Because not only did I learn about their ideas, but also their feelings. And importantly, I learned not just about the very real terror that they felt about the thought of them and everyone they loved and all the rest of humanity dying, but also the compassion that they demonstrated for the suffering and the poor as people who were vegans and kidney donors and 10% pledgers. These people clearly felt strongly enough about the suffering of others to act, and they sincerely believed that the best way they could help others was by shaping the development of transformative technology. I felt we had a common cause, and that created the bridge I needed to hear their arguments differently. And to be clear, while specific diets or donations are not the way that we should have barriers to entry for this community, I think that the people in this room are unusual in the amount that they care. And I want to make it easier for others to find that caring. Because however you feel, and it doesn't have to be the same as me, there's power in showing up as your full feeling self. Our stories should convey both sides of compassion, the strength of the feelings and the strength of the action that we take based upon them. And those feelings and actions will vary from person to person, and org to org, story to story, which gives each of us the opportunity to reach different audiences with different emotional registers. The EA brand and the fate of the EA community isn't going to be contained inside any one EA organization, CEA or otherwise. Ultimately, it's a composite of every EA actor, every EA ambassador, and advocate, and that means it's a composite of all of you. It will be a function of the stories told about you and the stories told by you. We are more than our spreadsheets. The diversity of our stories can strengthen our outreach if we make EA's public persona more reflective of the humans who built it. So, with that in mind, I have a favor to ask, which is that you don't fuck your feelings. Because sometimes, in order to make people think differently and act differently, we first need to make them feel. And so I hope you spend time this weekend learning, but I also hope you spend time feeling. I hope you take the stories you hear this weekend to inspire feelings in you. You are surrounded by so many compassionate people who fill the holes in the road and take heroic action to fill them in for others. I hope you leave here inspired with a renewed sense of what's possible when we bring our full selves to this work as people who feel and care and act. Being here with you makes me feel inspired to continue building this community because I believe in our compassion, and I believe in our principles, and I believe in our impact. I feel inspired to advocate for EA because I feel we can inspire others to join us, because I believe we've already achieved so much, and because I believe we are only just getting started. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Oscar.
Reminder that you can submit questions for Zach based on what you've just heard, or the questions that you already had coming in the Swap Card app and this, in this session. You ended on your inspiration to build and advocate for the EA community. What does that mean for you and for CEA? What actions are you currently prioritizing?
Yeah. So as I mentioned there, I think it's really important to talk about the ideas, but I also think it's important to talk about the reasons behind them and the humans behind them when we're going out there and advocating for them. We are building up an increasingly large comms team to do more and more of that. Just a few months ago, we were one person, and I expect us in the not too distant future to be 6 to be able to do more of this work. And I think we've already started to see some shifts in our communication strategy and branding to reflect this. One thing that many of you may have already seen is the new effectivealtruism.org website. And if you haven't, this is a little advertisement for you to go take a look.
Take a look and share it with your friends.
Yeah, even better. And one of the things that I really like about it is there's a little bit of video and more like live action at the top, but then there's also a bar where we have portraits of many different individuals, including some people in this room. Thank you very much for being featured, talking about their work and why they are doing it, with links to learn more. And I think that having humans who are inspiring can help us make ideas more inspiring. And I expect to see more content like that coming out of us and our branding strategy in the future.
Whether in relation to brands specifically and more generally, how is CEA's current strategy different than CEA's strategy a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago?
Yeah. So I want to speak with a little bit of humility about this. I was not at CEA 5 years ago, and so I'm speaking a little bit out of turn. Oscar can crack down on me if he feels like I am misleading any of you. But there was a shift. So before I came, not quite 5 years ago, but before I came, there was sort of a recognition of the potential role CEA had to play in really being a steward of the EA brand and taking on more communications responsibility there. Either fortunately or unfortunately, the first hire that happened for that was just a little bit before something called FTX that some of you might have heard of. And that didn't give a lot of time or mental space to come up with the more robust, proactive communication strategy that I think we would love to see for the brand going forward, as opposed to a more reactive one. And when I came in, I was really clear that part of the stewardship strategy that I wanted to do was, looking at what are these communal goods, these balls that nobody is holding, and what work can we do to try and help build those up. And the brand was one of my top priorities, and communicating better about our story to the outside world is something that's been really important. I think we and others have taken some actions. I highlighted some of that at the beginning, but I also think that part of what we've needed to do is build out our team to be able to do a lot of this, because there are a lot of people in the world who I think should and could hear more about EA, but we haven't had the opportunity to tell them yet. I've been extremely grateful to Emma, who some of you know, who has been anchoring our team for these past couple of years. And I'm also excited to have her with new colleagues now. And so we've been in a sort of ramping up phase. We collaborated with a number of organizations last year on sort of coming up with a broader brand strategy. And I'm excited to move the dial more into execution mode on that in our next phase.
One of the things that you've alluded to there is this promotion of the EA brand and taking the EA brand seriously, and CEA as a coordinator and a convener here. But the focus of your speech was on this: everyone here is the brand. How do you think about the trade-offs that people are making in terms of associating with the EA brand, and to what extent do you think that it is important that organizations or individuals are explicit in their association with EA named EA?
Yeah. Look, I think we should be extremely wary of talking in universals, and I don't want to go out and say all of you with all of the different diversity of causes and impacts need to do one thing. But something I sort of just hope for as a general heuristic is be honest. And I think that for many of us, we are honestly inspired by these EA principles. But also, honestly, those will manifest itself in different ways. For some of us, that means we work at organizations that literally have EA in the title, and we spend all of our time community building on EA. For some of us, we end up working at large multinational global health organizations that existed long before the words EA ever were there. And we can still be inspired by these principles, but that isn't our organizational identity, and we don't need to pretend that it is. I think there is a lot of variation on the spectrum. But when I just think more broadly, both about the rethink research that shows how other people get inspired by these, ideas and by our movement, and also just when I think about social change in general, I think there is a degree of moral courage that is required sometimes to be on the vanguard of humanity and to say, look, yes, I do have some unusual views or beliefs. I do care about shrimp welfare. And hey, here's a Daily Show clip to help you digest it a little bit. But whatever it is that you feel and believe, I think part of what persuades other people, part of what makes it less scary for other people to be out there is by others being on that vanguard and making it something where other people they feel proud to be around, like many of you in this community today, are also standing by it, are also advocating for it, are also associated with it. And I think this is a place where we can choose whether or not we want to be more or less than the sum of our parts. And I think we have the ability to make this something that resonates around the world. But I think to do that, we need the people around the world, the organizations around the world, and we need us to be able to stand up together to make that happen.
So if we are successful here in presenting this face to the world and attracting people to join us in our work, we're going to grow, and that's an explicit goal that we at CEA have, is growing the community. What does growth look like? What does a bigger EA look like?
It looks like more people in this room this time next year. I think that growth happens in a lot of different places, in a lot of different phases. I think it happens across causes is an important thing for us. We've been really clear about taking a principles first view, recognizing that different people can be motivated by these 4 principles that we outlined that we believe sort of define or encapsulate EA. But then they can be motivated to work on a variety of different causes. And when we're thinking about growth, we are thinking about growth of people motivated by those principles, not just people within any one given cause. I also think that when we're thinking about it, we are thinking ambitiously, but we're thinking on a long time horizon, and we are thinking about what it means to set things up sustainably. And that's where we do work around the brand. That's where we also think about work around funding diversification, which I think has become an increasingly important topic in this community, where I worry about, I have been incredibly grateful for open philanthropy, but I worry about us only scaling up with the pocketbook of one actor, and if that puts us in a very fragile state if anything else changes. And I think, again, I want us to feel a collective responsibility there. The last thing I'll say before I stop my rambles here is I don't think it is growth at all costs, and I do in fact believe there are and should be limits to our growths. And in particular, it feels very important to me that EA ideas and principles are represented honestly and accurately. And in some ways, an idea that is foundational to many of the actions that we take is this idea of neglectedness and pursuing things that the rest of the world doesn't. And if we continue to hold that dear to us, that means that we will be the minority, and we will be the people on the edge. We will be the vanguard of humanity. And I think a criteria for success, like I think we have seen in many ways with AI safety, is us being at the vanguard, us being the weirdos, us being the people who are willing to have the moral courage until the rest of the world had the time to catch up. And I want us to be able to continue to do that with sticking with our principles.
We'll see if I can say this. Extremely moving question. What's your favorite spreadsheet?
You are speaking straight to my heart, and I could go down many rabbit holes. We do not have enough hours for this. Okay. I literally have, I don't remember how many pages it is, like 10page.com, like spreadsheets and formatting. And
he's not joking, he does.
This is, yeah. But I'm going to a little bit cop out here and say I don't have one that immediately comes to mind. I love my spreadsheet children equally, but what I do have is I have features of spreadsheets I love. And in particular, a thing that I think is deeply utilized is formatting and color coding and like things like, yeah, whoever you are, I like you. Bolding, changing font colors, making sure your cells are appropriately sized. I'm like your formulas can be the most correct things in the world, and if people can't understand them, like spreadsheets should be a means of communication, and I think that is something that is often overlooked. Also, they're a means of communication with yourself, and the number of bugs I have found in spreadsheets because they are not well formatted, and then somebody has something hiding in a cell that is, and then they don't realize it because it isn't easy to sense check because they don't understand why they did it in the first place because it wasn't well labeled. That is a problem. Please don't do that. Please format your spreadsheets well. Yeah, I have some strong feelings on this one.
Okay, well, we can't end here because the whole talk was how we're not just spreadsheets. Looking ahead to this weekend, the coming month, the coming year, before we're all back here again next year, how do you feel looking ahead to what comes next?
I feel really hopeful. I just feel like there is a sense of energy and momentum that I haven't felt in years, or that I have increasingly felt over the past, I don't know, year and a half. As Rich has mentioned, I think we're growing. It is not just events like this, but people engaging with us in a variety of ways, people finding us, again, through things like The Daily Show, which I think is a wild state of being. And part of what I also love about that Daily Show story, if people haven't heard about it, is that it was somebody who was blogging on the internet, and that their blog was read by, I think, one of the producers or staffers on the show, and that was what led to somebody going and pitching the idea internally and into it being featured. And I'm like seeing that person is not like paid by CEA to go do a bunch of blogging or anything along those lines. Like that's somebody who is motivated by these ideas, these principles to go and act there. I think that there is just like a power to individuals taking action and to people being excited and to talking about that and to spreading these ideas out in this world that I am increasingly seeing. And I'm increasingly seeing that alongside actual real ways in which the world is different. And sometimes, unfortunately so, with things like USAID and our very necessary response to it. But yeah, that seeing things like that makes me believe, okay, we are far from all of our potential and all of the ways which we could get. But I feel extremely appreciative of the people who are here today working on it to get us on that right path.
It's a great place to close. Sorry that I have coughed through this part of the session. For those of you who want to continue the conversation with Zach has office hours coming up next. Does anyone know which room Zach's office is? Aurora 16 is where you can continue the conversation with Zach. Thank you all very much for being here this morning. Thank you all very much for being here this weekend. Thank you for all of the work that you are doing to promote EA, advocate for EA, and in your own work, making the world a better place. I need to stop talking now. Any final words from you,
Thank you,
Zach?
Oscar, and thank you, all of you.